Is Coca-Cola a good company to work for? In this video, we're going to be looking at Coca-Cola through the lens of our Daggerfinn Employer Brand Index, but more specifically, we're going to be looking through some of the pillars with which we build our credit scoring system. So that you get a backstage, kind of behind the scenes look at how we view employer brands, how we break them down, and so that you can make an informed decision around whether to invest your career or your resume on a company like this. A little bit of background on Coca-Cola. This is one of the great CPG brands that's really ever existed. Founded in 1886 in Atlanta, Coca-Cola is ubiquitous. I mean, we see it at all the major sporting events. We see it at all the major kind of cultural events. Every theme park you go to, any kind of major vacation that you're on, you'll see Coke or a competitor, such that it's a brand that's always top of mind. In terms of diversification of its products and where it sits kind of from a positioning standpoint, this is a brand that it's not just Coca-Cola. It owns things like Sprite and Dasani, Minute Maid, a whole bunch of other or CPG companies. So from a diversification standpoint, as an employee, there really are no issues there. This is a brand that will withstand most downturns. I mean, your career is safe from that standpoint. But let's dive in. Let's have a look at some of the elements that go into how we look at an employer brand. So the first thing we like to look at is the website, the company's website, and there's nothing worse than applying to a position at a company and the website is outdated or doesn't exist. But here with Coca-Cola, I mean, not surprising. It's a stunning website. I mean, it's clear, looks to showcase the products that it sells, has a lot of kind of social messaging that's important with today's workforce. These are all things that you can learn about right on the homepage, and just generally really, really nicely done. You've got to scroll kind of all the way to the bottom here to get to their careers area, which is fine. But let's dive in there just to have a look at kind of what the company looks like from a careers portal standpoint. So once we've transitioned over to the careers page, this is what it looks like. Again, not surprising considering the heritage and the capability of this company, that this is truly one of the better career pages that exists. The key function or the key purpose of a careers page, it's not only just to hold the job descriptions and show people what jobs are available at the organization. Job seekers are looking for information on what they can expect as part of their employment contract, as part of the organization. So it's a great idea for companies to showcase kind of messaging and brand codes and employer value propositions here on their careers page. The longer you can keep a job seeker on this page, I always say the better, especially if they're clicking around and learning about different things. You can start to build interest and you build enthusiasm for the company before they even get to the place where they're applying for a position. So here we've got an about the company section where you can learn about the more than 200 brands that the Coke encompasses. You learn a little bit about the people behind the company, which is excellent. We've got to remember always that the people buy from people, and that's absolutely true as well on the hiring front. The impression that you can make when you meet somebody that you jive with during the interview process is fantastic. And so you kind of take away variables by showcasing more on the through the employment or the careers portal, and so that's a great idea, helping our people grow. That's another area that is very important to show in a careers portal. Job seekers are looking for how a company can serve them in their career aspirations. The employment dynamic now isn't just what value can I bring to an organization. Job seekers today are looking for what an organization can provide them, and the clearer that you can show the trajectory or the development path on a careers portal, the better. And it looks like Coke is making a real effort here to do that. And then finally, they've got a section on culture and community, again speaking to that social narrative, the social dynamic that is just growing in importance with the workforce today. Companies are no longer seen as kind of that Milton Friedman top line, like financials driven. You've got to be more social socially active, or at least the large companies that have the balance sheets to do so are expected to be at the forefront of social issues, and whatever issues that a company chooses to be a part of, it's a good idea to show them on the careers page. So it looks like Coca-Cola is doing that here, which is excellent. They link to their Glassdoor, they link to their LinkedIn, which are great places for a job seeker to learn a little bit more about the company while keeping the narrative controlled. So that's great. And then you've got some other kind of reading here. So in terms of just aesthetics and what a job seeker would expect from a careers page, this is excellent and speaks just to I would say that the thoughtfulness and care that Coca-Cola is thinking about their candidate experience, which I think for all intents and purposes will bleed through to the employee experience and stand someone in good stead if they are choosing to apply to a company like Coca-Cola. Let's go from there over to the LinkedIn page, which was one of the pages that they linked to. And when it comes to LinkedIn, you're just looking for, or at least job seekers are looking for, a little bit more information if possible on the company. You want to look at the number of employees at an organization. It's a little bit skewed here because Coca-Cola is, again, one of the biggest companies in the world. So they're going to have thousands and thousands of employees. But what we'd like to look at from an employer brand standpoint is for companies that maybe are a little bit smaller, starting to look at some of the employees, look at tenure, look at things like that to see whether the company does a good enough job keeping its employees. And that's always easier the smaller the company is. But with a company like Coca-Cola, you can almost guarantee that tenure is probably decent. Their C-suite's probably been around for a little while, so your job seekers can rest assured, I think, that they're in good hands, at least working for a company like Coca-Cola, just by virtue of how long it's been around. There you go. So median tenure is 3.6 years. That's above average for today's day and age, and their 10% headcount growth is a good sign, especially when you consider the macroeconomic factors right now. Companies are struggling to hire. The companies are struggling with kind of the labor shortage, and so their ability to improve headcount despite the macroeconomic factors, again, is a good sign from a job seeker standpoint that this is a company that is attractive and probably looks good on your resume long term too. So everything on the LinkedIn page speaks to a company that's still growing, at least in headcount, and it's probably a decent place to be for now. Before we dive into some of the financials, or what we call the fundamentals, let's jump over to the LinkedIn profile. Social media is one of those places that we know job seekers are looking more and more at as they go through the candidate experience, or as they think about applying to a job. And for the most part, job seekers, you don't have to look that deeply at social media. You're just looking for kind of, again, thoughtfulness and care. It's one of those boxes, social, that if you just check it off in a way that looks like your company is professional and that you guys know what you're doing, it's enough from a job seeker standpoint. And so when we look at Coca-Cola here, you've got some messaging around different social issues. It's consistent. I mean, this is one of the great brands of the world with a great branding team. So all good here. I'd say no issues, no red flags from a job seeker standpoint. I'd say it's important in this day and age for job seekers to understand the social causes and the social issues that a company attaches itself to. And so if I were going to apply to a company like Coca-Cola, I'd probably spend a little bit of time here clicking around, just understanding what causes Coke is being attached to, or they're choosing to attach themselves to, just to learn about the perspective of the company and see if those jive with what I believe in as an individual. So no red flags there. So the next thing we like to look at is reputation. That's an interesting one to look at, but the stronger the company is from a communications and a PR standpoint, typically that's a good sign as an employer. So it means that the company knows how to work the media a little bit, or it knows how to work at least channels where you can get information out. What job seekers you don't want to look what you don't want to see, at least when you do a narrative kind of assessment, is the company kind of in heat for different things in the press, or if they are facing certain issues, how they're dealing with them. And so it's important to kind of look through the news portion, plug in the brand name just to see it. And Coca-Cola, again, very, very good from a branding and brand code perspective. I mean, there's really nothing too negative about the company here. It's pretty clean. And a lot of talk about the stock, which is not surprising, but nothing that raises a red flag and says that, okay, we've got to be careful about applying to a company like this. So all good on that front. The next thing we typically like to look at is a company's Glassdoor presence, just to see what it's like from an employee experience standpoint, and then also trust in leadership and different things like that. We like to see decent scores, but I think one of the important things to remember as a job seeker is that Glassdoor is an echo chamber, and the way that human beings work is if you have a kind of a mediocre to an above average experience at a company, you're not typically going to leave a review. And so it's important for job seekers to remember, and also companies to remember, that the Glassdoor will be very, very steep or very high on the variance. So you'll get probably a lot of negative experiences, because people that are angry are going to go and try and voice their opinion. And then you'll also have a lot of like 5-star great experience. But with a big enough review base, it should net out to where a job seeker can trust the score and base a rough kind of employee experience on what they see. And so I think, we know that the average Glassdoor review rating is 3.3. Coca-Cola is again one of the biggest companies in the world, and so for them to have a 4-star rating is excellent, considering what you imagine would be just the natural turnover that would happen at an organization. So 4 stars is excellent, speaks very highly to their employee experience. It seems like people are happy there. The fact that more than 3/4 of the people that reviewed or would recommend the company to a friend, it speaks very, very strongly as well. And then 8 and 10, 8.5 and 10 approve of the CEO. Again, one of those things that I think is speaks very highly to Coca-Cola's experience. Approval of the CEO is one of those things. Not everybody is actually that connected to the CEO if you think about an org chart, and one as big as Coca-Cola. So for everybody, or nearly everybody, to speak or to point that highly to its leadership speaks very highly about the company. So I'd say from an employer brand standpoint, it's an excellent thing to look at. And then from a job seeker standpoint, you're seeing incredible strength there. I'd say something that really speaks quite highly to the performance of the company. So after we've had a look there, I think it's important to look at some of the fundamentals of the organization. This is kind of the nitty-gritty financials. And the reason that we look at this from an employer brand standpoint is that we're trying to gauge resilience and whether the company has the financial means to withstand certain downturns. I think if you think about the last 18 months with COVID, I think there hasn't been anything clear that shows that it's important to, as a job seeker, as somebody employed, to understand the financial strength of an organization, to understand whether it can withstand a downturn. So this is what I think is quite important to look at from an employer brand standpoint, and something that I would recommend job seekers look at when they want to understand whether a brand is good to work for. If these things are available, I mean, they've got to be public companies typically to be able to see financials. But the first thing you want to look at is the cash and cash equivalents. That just shows you the cash strength of an organization. Again, we're looking at one of the biggest brands in the world here, so no surprise they're sitting on about 6.8 billion in cash in 2020. It's growth over 2019 where they were at 6.5 billion, which speaks well. That speaks to them being able to manage their liabilities, and then also it speaks to them putting cash away. So in the event of a catastrophic downturn, they've probably got enough cash on hand to cover what they need to and make sure that people are still employed. The second thing I like to look at here is net income, but not on an annual basis. You want to look at it in terms of trend, just to see if there's growth as an organization. The most exciting opportunities for an employer for an employee are typically at companies that are growing, regardless of size, and because that's where opportunity to put your hands in different places typically comes from. And what we can see here with Coca-Cola on that consolidated net income line is growth from 2018 to 2019. Understandable. I think I feel like if we extended this backwards a few more years, you'd see some more growth, and then a downward trend in 2020, which again is probably COVID driven. If you think about how Coca-Cola structures its business and where its consumers are, events were basically turned off for the last year and a half. There are major sporting events and things like that have been turned off. A lot of the kind of the hospitality industries had their lockdowns and were turned off. So it's understandable that there was a dip in their net income. It could also speak to other, maybe there's they've had to make investments in other places. But on a trend basis, you're looking at a company here that's very strong. And I think that when we get to see the 2021 numbers, I think we're going to see another uptick. So from a financials and a balance sheet and a consolidated financial statement standpoint, this is a company I think that as a job seeker you should have no fear in joining, because they have the means and they have the ability to take care of their employees, and so there's no issues there. Another thing with public companies that we like to look at from an employer brand standpoint is just is stock price, and not in a snapshot kind of way. We like to look at trends, and so this is the stock price for the Coca-Cola company over the last 5 years. You can of course see that massive dip in March of 2020. We all know why that happened with the shutdowns and COVID, but I mean you can see a very steep curve there from the Q1 of 2020 through to today, where it's almost gonna at some point reach its highs again at around, it looks like $60 there, that it reached right before the COVID pandemic. So again, you're looking at a company that the market at least sees as a good investment, as a good place to put its money, and that then speaks positively to the employee experience, and that speaks positively to the strength of the employer, in terms of where you'd want to invest a career going forward. So in terms of the fundamentals, we looked at a little bit of the financial statements there. We look at stock price. Everything I think is trending positively. If you were an employee that had the opportunity to have options or to have investments put into a Coca-Cola stock, like no issues. Again, I think you'd be very confident and very happy, I think, over the long term with where your financial standing would be after a little while. So employer brand, they're very strong. There's absolutely no issues there. And then just finally a few kind of final thoughts on Coca-Cola, just in thinking about where you want to be working. We like to just think of it from a conceptual standpoint on the resume. I mean, one of the things we've talked about this in other videos, but job seekers and the employee experience is driven by kind of the personal perspective, right? So do people want to work at your company because it means that they can get somewhere better in the future or larger in the future? Does your company have the org chart such that you can support rapid growth or growth to a very high level? And when we think about Coca-Cola here, it's almost an unfair advantage. This is a company that is public, has been around a long time, has a massive talent base. I mean, it has tons of brands. So in terms of getting your foot in the door as an employee, having the opportunity to look around and say, you know what, I'd like to go there one day. I'd like to work in that function one day. I'd like to attach to that brand one day. This is one of the strongest brands in the world, and I think that you really can't go wrong if you have the ability to get in at a company like this. So all in all, I think Coca-Cola would do very well and does very well on our employer brand index, and does very well against our credit scoring system. If I were looking at a job, I have no issues going to Coca-Cola.